Hello, everybody, again. Welcome to Ben on Sports. We have an episode coming to you not on a Wednesday or Thursday like the NFL predictions. You know what that means? It's not an NFL prediction show. We are, for the first time ever, we're doing a sport other than the NFL. We're going to be moving to the MLB and doing some MLB playoff predictions. We got the whole bracket set, even with some odd double headers on Monday. That makes it harder to know what the bracket is. Uh, but nonetheless, we got it. Thank you all for showing up. I hope you liked the first baseball video. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. And here's how this video is going to work. We're going to start with the AL. I'm going to show you the AL playoff bracket. Then we're going to go through the matchups. And we're not just going to go through the first round. I have predicted the whole bracket out. And I'm going to go through all the matchups, even the ones that may not happen, but the ones that I think are going to happen based off of who wins what. And then I'll give you a refresher and see where I stand. Then we'll go do the NL in the same way we do the AL. And then I'm going to give you a refresher of the NL bracket. And then we're going to do the World Series with the two teams I think are going to make the World Series. So without further ado, here we go. Let's see the AL bracket. Orioles hosting Wild Card Series. They are the 4 seed against the Kansas City Royals 5. The other Wild Card Series here is Houston and Detroit. Astros versus Tigers. Houston is hosting. The winner of the Orioles and Royals plays the Yankees, the number 1 seed in the AL. And the winner of the Tigers and Astros will get Cleveland, the number 2 overall seed. So here we go. First matchup, Baltimore versus Kansas City. Let's start with Baltimore. Some reasons why I think they'll win. They won the season series 4-2. The season series, I think, can be a good indicator of how teams match up, but it is not the end-all be-all, especially when both of these series these teams played were in April, so a very, very long time ago. Both teams are completely different since then, but the Orioles did win it 4-2. I think the Orioles are also kind of the better team on paper. They were also expected to be here. The Royals weren't. You definitely have more star power on the Orioles, for lack of a better term. I think both of these teams have a couple main stars, but I think the Orioles have better players behind them. I think the Orioles are definitely the better overall team on paper. The Orioles have kind of been here before, not really. They were here last year, but as we all know, the Orioles went through a long rebuild before that. But the Royals haven't been here to the playoffs since they won the World Series in 2015. And the Orioles were here last year. So the Orioles have a little bit more experience. The Orioles have 20 of their 26 players on their roster with postseason experience. I can't remember the Royals number off the top of my head, but I know it's not nearly as much. So the Orioles are definitely comfortable in the environment. The team is healthier. For large stretches of the second half, they had a lot of guys out. The team is finally healthier. It's never going to be 100% healthy. They have too many guys out for the rest of the season, but they're healthier. Because they're healthier, I think the offense is heating up. You have a lot of their important right-handed hitters back, and I think that's huge when they're facing lefties. Beginning of the year, they were killing left-handed pitching, which is going to be very important in this Kansas City series. Why are some reasons I think the Royals will win? They're a young team. They're playing on house money. I think that's a very common thing, a common additive in sports, and I think it's true here with the Royals. They weren't really supposed to be here. I think everybody expected them to improve, but not this much. So nobody expects us to be here. We have no pressure. And the main reason why they're here is Bobby Witt Jr. is a star. He might be the best player in the series. It's probably between him and Gunnar Henderson. They probably are the two best shortstops in the MLB, and they're playing each other in the first round. So that kind of sucks. But Bobby Witt Jr. is a star capable of carrying this team, and he's going to need to have a big series if the Royals want to pull it out. I think the Royals' starting pitching staff is healthier. I know that they are. Not a whole lot of injuries. The Orioles have been decimated by injuries throughout the year in the starting pitching staff with their starting staff. And I think it's going to help the Royals. They're going to start with two pretty darn good pitchers. We'll see how the Orioles can match up. More on that a little bit later. The Royals have a better, more consistent and defined bullpen. Everybody has their roles. You know who's coming out when, and I think they've been more consistent throughout the year, especially compared to the Orioles. And they have run wild on the Orioles this season, and I don't mean this from they've dominated them. I mean, the Royals have a lot of speedy guys, and they have stolen the Orioles blind. The Royals were all over the bases the first two series. And if you're the Orioles, you've got to be able to control a run game better than they have most of the season, or this Royals team is going to be able to find ways to take extra bags, and that's going to lead to extra runs. Let's get into why I think both of these teams won't win. The Orioles had a really bad second half where it seems like they were almost uninspired to play. Their starting pitching, they have Corbin Burns, elite. He is the guy. He is a surefire ace. You hand the ball to him, and you know you have a chance to win. And Zach Eflin has been really, really good since getting traded to the Orioles. But who they have behind them and who steps up behind them is going to be massive. Because of injuries to guys like Grayson Rodriguez, Kyle Bradish, John Means, if that's your rotation after Burns and Eflin, you probably have the best rotation in Major League Baseball. But injuries have taken all those guys away. So matching up with the Royals starting staff in this series and the rest of the postseason is going to be a big thing, because who do you have behind Burns and Eflin? And it's going to add more pressure, because if you can't win Burns and Eflin, now who do you have to throw out there? So that's a little bit concerning, and their bullpen's a little bit shaky. They've had some up and down performances. Kimbrel isn't there anymore, but Dominguez has been very shaky as closer for the Orioles. So the back end of that bullpen is a little bit scary. And in the playoffs, you really need a bullpen that, when you have a lead, shuts the game down. Why will the Royals not win this series? They haven't been here before. Like I said, they're young. Not a lot of their guys have playoff experience. Salvador Perez does, but outside of that, I think you get a little bit worried. Lack of consistency behind Witt and Perez. They have a lot of guys that can have some hot stretches and a lot of guys that can have long, cold stretches. There's not sure offense really behind Salvador Perez and Bobby Witt. You're hoping Pasquantino is healthy and can give you something. They try to do some things at the deadline, but really behind Perez and Witt, there's not a lot of consistency, and that can be a huge cause for concern offensively in the playoffs. And these last two, the last two are maybe psychological things, not as much physical things with the team. Well, sometimes with young teams, maybe they celebrate or are excited just to be in the playoffs, and they don't take the playoffs seriously, or they view they've won the season because they made the playoffs, but they're not ready to advance in the playoffs. And I think that could be something that could come and get Kansas City. Very young team. They're just happy to be here. Potentially. I'm not saying that that's what I believe. I'm saying that could potentially happen. And lastly, they're unproven versus good teams. If you take the Chicago White Sox, who are the worst team in MLB history, they were 12-1 against them this season because they play in the same division. Take those games out, they are below 500, and they did not perform well against good teams. That could be a concern because the playoffs is nothing but good teams. So that could be part of the reason why they made it in the first place and not some other teams. So they're going to have to get over that mental hump. They might not even know about that. I think the series is really close and interesting. It might be a rare 3-game wild card series. I would not be shocked if the Royals find a way to win this one, but I'm going to go for the Orioles. I think the Orioles are just more prepared, and they don't want another playoff letdown like last season. Their offense is starting to find their footing, and the staff was good in September. So I think the Orioles win this one. It might take 3 games. The Royals could. I would not be shocked if the Royals win. I think I lean 60% Orioles, 40% Royals. Moving on to the next series, Astros and Tigers, 3 versus 6. Let's go over the reasons why I think they're going to win. Everybody knows the Astros, they always show up in the fall. They've been here. They've done that. They never go out first round. They're always in it to the end. So much experience. That's kind of what those first 2 points are getting at. They are so familiar with playoff baseball. Their offense is still loaded, which is interesting when you look at the course of their dynasty. They've lost so many guys, but this offense is always loaded. Yordan Alvarez might be hurt for this series. I think he's out for this series. That's very unfortunate for Houston, but I think they should still have enough pieces to win the series without Yordan Alvarez. And their pitching staff has found a way. A lot of pitching injuries, and Justin Verlander, I mean, he's 41, so and has kind of looked like it, but their pitching staff has found a way. Framber Valdez has been that guy. Ronel Blanco has stepped up for him. They got Yusei Kikuchi at the deadline. They have 2 young rookies in Spencer Brown and and Brown and Arrighetti, and they don't need all five of them. You usually only need four pitchers in your starting rotation in the playoffs, and their pitching has found the way, and it looks really good. And after their slow first 2 months, they've had the best record in the American League since the start of June, and I think that's for good reason. This Astros team could make another deep run in the playoffs. The Tigers, well, they have the best pitcher in the American League this season. They have Tariq Skubal, who is, if any player in the playoffs is capable of single-handedly winning a game, it's Tariq Skubal. And Tariq Skubal, while he is not the only elite pitcher they have, their pitching staff is incredibly good, even after trading Jack Flaherty. So if the Tigers are going to win, I think it's going to be on the strength of their pitching staff. And to me, they kind of feel like a team of destiny in a sense. They've had so much wackiness happen. They've had to overcome such small odds. It just feels like, how do you beat a team that seems like they have everything going right from the baseball gods? It's just they shouldn't have been here in the first place. They have a kind of a little bit with the Royals on terms of the White Sox padding their schedule, although they did lose their last 2 games of the season to them. But the Tigers' elite pitching can carry you a long way in the postseason, and I think if they keep the wackiness up and their pitching stays up, I think they'll be fine. Why won't they win? They weren't good for a lot of stretches of this season. A lot of shaky up and down play. It took a lot going right to make it. It wasn't just that they played better the last month and a half of the season. It was that the Twins absolutely fell apart. It was that some of these other teams that were close also had bad second halves, and that helped them get up, right? So it wasn't just that they played well. It was that a lot of other teams played bad, and that takes a lot. And I think they probably played really, really hard to overcome that deficit where some teams were coasting. They're incredibly inexperienced, as you can see the last point. Not a whole lot of guys have any playoff experience, and I think that is going to hurt them. And where's the offense coming from? No consistent offense. There's a lot of guys that have some decent stats for them, but even they have been up and down at times this season. I just don't see them mounting enough offense consistently to beat anybody in the postseason. And I think the Astros probably win this this series in 2 games. Next matchup, assuming the Orioles win. So this is now, we're all in predicted series. Assuming the Orioles win, they'll be playing the Yankees. Yankees have home field advantage, and these two teams are incredibly familiar with each other. I'm going to try not to repeat a whole bunch of information here with the teams we've already talked about, just stuff that's pertaining to this series. But the Yankees we haven't talked about yet, so let's get into them. They have maybe the best offensive duo in the league in Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, and that is, and I mean, I don't think there's enough superlatives to explain these guys. They're really good when healthy, and they can carry an offense by themselves when healthy. Garrett Cole has looked better every single month as he gets farther away from his long absence, and playoff Garrett Cole is usually pretty darn good. And as long as he's at the top of that rotation, they're going to be pretty okay, I think. They have a lot of guys with playoff experience. They've made a lot. Take out last year, they had a lot of consecutive years of playoff contention with a lot of the same core, so they're not new to the playoff environment. Secondly, let's go back to that guy, Aaron Judge. I think he owns the Orioles. Like, if you look at Aaron Judge's career numbers against the Orioles, they might be better than any other team he plays against. I mean, Aaron Judge sees the Orioles and I think hits a home run every single time, or at least every single game. So Aaron Judge loves batting against the Orioles, and I think that could come into effect because I don't think that's going to magically stop in the playoffs. Why the Orioles are going to win? They're not scared of the Yankees. They won the season series 8-5 this year. They won the series last year. They know they can go to New York and win. They're not going to be scared of this team like a lot of teams are. I think sometimes you see these big market teams and people get scared. Not the Orioles. They've proven they can beat the Yankees, and I don't think they're going to show up and be scared. I think their lineup is deeper. This kind of ties into why the Yankees won't win, than inconsistently behind their stars offensively. Aaron Judge and Juan Soto are really good, but sometimes the rest of that lineup isn't. And when the rest of that lineup is on a cold spell or isn't working, isn't playing well, the offense falls flat on its face. The Orioles, on the other hand, have a very deep lineup composed of a lot of guys who can hurt you 1 through 9. And I think that is a big advantage over the Yankees because they don't necessarily always have that. And again, Garrett Cole is really good, but the Orioles have seen Garrett Cole a lot. They know how to beat him. They have beaten him. And frankly, the Orioles have seen a lot of the Yankees' top starting pitchers this season. And I guess the same is true for the Yankees, but because of the Orioles starting pitching injuries, they've actually had different guys pitching at different times where they haven't necessarily seen all the Orioles pitchers. But I mean, the Orioles knowing the pitchers is going to go into the fact that, again, they're not scared of the Yankees. And I think sometimes that's a big hurdle to overcome. Why won't these teams win? We touched on the Yankees being offensively thin. The bullpen has been inconsistent at times. There's a lot of guys talking, a lot of media talking about, can Clay Holmes be the closer for the Yankees? Maybe, maybe not. But it's been very shaky for them at times. And who do you go to after Cole? They've had some very, very good performances this season. But Luis Heel, not as good the second half as he was the first half. Clay Holmes has been good. Uh, do you trust Stroman? He has playoff experiences. I think sometimes the Yankees have been shaky behind Garrett Cole, and either it's guys who haven't been great this season, especially the second half, or it's guys who are unproven in the playoffs. So if those guys are able to perform to the level that they have in the past or earlier this season, I think they can be fine after Cole, but that is a question to ask. And for the Orioles, why they won't win? While they made the playoffs last year, they've never made a deep playoff run. In fact, they got swept last year. So this would be uncharted territory for them. This core has never made it out of the divisional series. They are lacking a little bit in starting pitching, and against Judge and Soto, you don't want to be lacking in starting pitching because those two will hurt you enough by themselves if you don't have quality pitching. And similar to the Yankees, shaky bullpen, especially at the closer. Like we kind of talked about it already, but that shaky bullpen has got to get straightened out. And the Orioles are hoping with guys like Coulomb and Jacob Webb back from the IL that it will straighten out. Guardians and Astros, 2 seed versus 3 seed. So the Guardians will be the home field. Why they'll win? The offense, despite not always being great on paper, they seem like they always find a way this season. And I think that's huge. um, Ramirez and Kwan have been great offensively for them. Kwan's getting on base. He has better power numbers than he ever had. And Ramirez is one of the most underappreciated players in the American League in the last decade. I don't care if that's a hot take. I don't care if you agree with me. He is. He's almost pretty much every year a threat to have 40 home runs, 40 stolen bases, great power, great speed, great defense. And he's just not appreciated because he's on Cleveland. But him and Kwan are leading this team offensively that seems like it shouldn't be as good as it is. And with Cleveland, when you do get into those late innings, especially the ninth, if you have the win, you're feeling, or if you have the lead, you're feeling pretty confident about a win because Emmanuel Clase is the best closer in the MLB. At least he has been this season. And you want to talk about shutting the door. He shuts the door, puts 2 locks on it, and then I think he might be welding it shut like it's a steel door that he's welding shut. If you have the lead, Clase is finishing off that game, and that is a massive advantage. The Astros, we kind of talked about it. They're always here. They've been here, done that. And they're not going to be scared of the Guardians. They won the season series this year 4-1. The last game of the season got canceled, and it was inconsequential to the grander scheme, so they didn't have to play it. But I feel like Houston has a lot more star power than Cleveland, and sometimes star power does win out in the playoffs, and sometimes teams that run on the power of friendship like the Guardians win out. But I think because Houston's been here before, they're not scared of the moment. I think that Houston's going to make it out of the series just fine. So, assuming I'm correct, it would leave us with an ALCS, the American League Championship Series of the Astros and Orioles. And this is kind of funny because you think the front office that started that Astros rebuild when they started coming to relevance was led by Mike Elias, and now Mike Elias is on the Orioles rebuilding the Astros. And what I would argue a pretty similar fashion that he started building the Astros. So I just think that's an interesting storyline here. But why the Astros are going to win this game? Win this series. They've been the 7 straight ALCS appearances before the season, and they've won 4 of them. Assuming they make it again, it will be their 8th straight ALCS appearance. They are not scared of being here. I keep repeating it, but I think it's so huge in the playoffs. Astros know how to win in the postseason. They've proven it for almost the last decade. They're not going to be scared by the big moments. They've dominated Baltimore even after the rebuild, especially in Baltimore. Baltimore has some success against Houston. They've won some series in Houston, but in Baltimore, I think Houston likes Baltimore more than they like Houston. Houston has kind of have had the Orioles number. And that shows by them winning the season series 5-2. And just like Aaron Judge loves seeing this team, Jose Altuve loves seeing the Orioles. He plays really, really well against them. Average over 300, some pretty good power numbers. I don't know. I guess some stars love seeing the Orioles. And maybe some of that is the remnants of the rebuild when they weren't very good. Why do I think the Orioles will win? I think their offense is deeper. I think the Orioles have one of the best 1-9 lineups, assuming everybody's hitting in the American, or in really not just the American League, the MLB. It's a really deep lineup, and the lineup is essentially 100% healthy. And speaking of health, they got healthy. I don't need to keep talking about some of these same points with the Orioles or the Astros. So I'll try and summarize why they won't here. The Astros, they have got their pitching staff shirt up. Apologies. But in the ALCS, you're going to need more and more pitching, right? The later rounds you go, the more games you're playing. And at some point, does Verlander factor into your plans? He's 41, and this core for Houston is aging. At some point, this aging core is going to not be able to win with the same success that they have been. Eventually, this core is going to fall off. Is that this season? Who knows? But it's a good thing for Houston to have a complete team where the why they won't win the World Series column is filled with questions and not definite holes. Why the Orioles are going to struggle with the Astros? Well, they've only held the Astros under 5 runs once this entire season. The Astros are destroying Baltimore pitching this year. Even Corbin Burns, who is supposed to be the Orioles' number 1 guy. They have a disadvantage in the bullpen, which means close games late are probably going to swing Houston's way because Houston has a bullpen that you have more confidence in than Baltimore. And again, kind of what I was talking about with the storyline earlier, can the student become the master in terms of the way these teams are built? Like I said, a lot of similarities. Can the Orioles be the next Houston Astros? I think that's what Mike Elias wants. Only time will tell. But in this series, I think Houston's time is still here. I don't think it's the Orioles' time. I think the Orioles need one more year of maturation, and then it'll really be time for them to take the mantle if they're capable. I think this is Houston's last year of being the best team in the American League. Come playoff time, I don't think they care too much about regular season anymore. They keep starting in a big deficit and running whoever's leading the AL West down. So I think Houston wins this series, but I think it might be the last ALCS they win in a while. All right, so now we're moving over to the NL, and we're going to see who I have coming to the World Series out of the NL. Wild card series in the NL, we have the Padres hosting as the 4 seed with the Atlanta Braves at the 5 seed. The other wild card series is the Brewers hosting as a 3 seed with the Mets as the 6 seed. Winner of the Padres and Braves is going to get the Dodgers, who is the number 1 overall seed. They get home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And the number 2 seed Phillies. So here we go. First matchup, Padres and Braves, 2 second-place teams. Just like we did with the AL, we're going to start with why I think each team can win their series. The Padres are finally healthy. They've been dealing with injuries a lot, even last year into this year. But I think their team is finally healthy. They have a lot of star power on offense. Machado, Jurickson Profar has established himself as a star. Fernando Tatis, probably the biggest star on that team. Then you even have guys like Xander Bogaerts, who has won a World Series. Jake Cronenworth. They have a lot of star power on offense. It helps when you're willing to spend a lot of money. They have 2 to 3 great starters, I think, at least in the regular season. We'll talk a little bit more about that as the video goes on. They've had 2 or 3 great starters in the regular season, and they have a great back end of the bullpen. I think the Padres might have the best bullpen in the playoffs. I think if they have a lead going into the 7th inning, I don't think too many teams are going to be able to mount comebacks because I think that's how many shutdown guys they have at the back end, led by Tanner Scott and Ranger Suarez. That is a lethal 1-2 option in the 8th and 9th inning, and they have plenty of guys that are really good to fill the 7th. They have struck out the least amount of any team in the MLB this season. They struck out the least amount, so they don't strike out a lot. They get on base. I believe they're leading the MLB in average. It's always a good combo when you lead the league in average and lead the error and last in the league in times getting struck out. So that's a really good combo for the Padres. They're right around 10th in power, so they're top third, but they're not one of the best teams. They're not like some of the other teams in the playoffs. But when you're not striking out and getting on base, you can put up a lot of runs, and that's what the Padres do. Why do I think the Braves will win? They have experience. They won the World Series in 2021. They've been in the playoffs every year since then. A lot of guys on this roster are comfortable in the postseason. They have a great offense, despite some of the injuries. Still a pretty darn good offense. And they have a good pitching staff. Their pitching staff is similar to some other postseason teams. They've dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the year, but they have found the way to stay dominant. How about a resurgent Chris Sale? The Braves made a trade, took a risk on Chris Sale later in his career, and man, did it pay off. He looks like he's going to be the Cy Young for the NL. Just an incredible season out of him, looking like his old self. Now, do I think these teams won't win? I'm going to be honest, didn't have a lot of things for the Padres. I wanted to find some talking points. I said death with a question mark. We kind of talked about it already, but I don't think that's a massive issue for them. Like I said, I don't think you really need to worry about it in the playoffs. You're not playing more than 2 consecutive games, assuming you win the wild card in 2 games. But like you're really not playing a whole lot where you're going to need to take guys out. And I said maybe they haven't played together a lot because they've had a lot of injuries, so different guys have been in and out of the lineup, and they haven't coalesced completely. And maybe that hurts team chemistry, but I don't think that's really going to be the thing they have to worry about. Might be me grasping at straws, if I'm being honest. The Padres on paper look like a really complete team, one of the best teams going into the postseason. People have said that a lot the last couple of years with AJ Preller, and they didn't make it last year, and people said that, and they've only made one NLCS with this core, but maybe this year's the year. I kind of feel like it is. They might make me feel stupid again. Who knows? Why won't the Braves win this series? They do have a lot of injuries. They've managed to make it work even with the injuries, but I mean, missing Ronald Acuna, massive injury. They just have a lot of position player injuries. They have some pitching injuries like Spencer Strider. There's a lot of all-star caliber players that are not healthy with the Braves, and they won't be back for the postseason, and that's a lot to overcome, especially when you have a double header the day before the playoffs start, and now your pitching staff is depleted. Chris Sale is hurt, and it looks like he won't be competing in the wild card round if the news I read is still going to be accurate. And I think it's going to be too much for the Braves to overcome against the Padres, and I think the Padres are going to win this series, especially because Atlanta has to fly to San Diego overnight tonight. The next wild card series, the Mets and the Brewers, and for me, I think this was the hardest series to pick. This is like literally a 55-45 series, maybe even 50-50 series. I go back and forth on this. I can't say every day because it's not been that long since these teams were confirmed to play each other. But the Brewers, they can steal bases. I mean, I believe they were second in the entire league in stolen bases. So they're really going to be able to get out, stealing bases, running the base pass well, having lots of speed, can put a lot of pressure on a pitcher, can put a lot of pressure on the defense. They also have a really balanced pitching staff. You see a little bit later down, I have a comment about this, but they have a lot of guys that you may not know about, may not be household names, but they find a way to get it done, both in the bullpen and with the starters. And I think that's impressive. They kind of remind me of the Guardians a little bit, except maybe with less star power. It's kind of a power of friendship team, if you understand what I mean by that. If you don't, it's kind of a niche reference. I don't know. But the Brewers certainly surprised everybody when they were the 3 seed. They just find ways to win games, and at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters. Why do I think the Mets will win this? They definitely have more star power. They also have a good rotation. I think they lack a true ace, but they have a good rotation. And the lineup is playing well. They're heating up a little bit. Maybe not heating up, but they're definitely playing well. It's kind of opposite of what the Mets normally do, right? They usually start off really well and then fall off as the season goes on. Well, this year they started slow and got better as the season goes on, and maybe that's a good projection to have. So we'll see if the Mets can continue that good play. Why do I think these teams can't win their series? Brewers are incredibly inexperienced. They don't have a lot of guys on the roster um, that have playoff experience, and that really does matter. It's so rare for young teams with no playoff experience to go all the way or make a deep run in the playoffs. Not impossible, but it's rare. The Brewers, I said injuries is really one main injury. Christian Yelich is their best offensive player. He's been out most of the year and they've survived, but I think you need stars, you need bona fide studs that you can count on come playoff time. And while the Brewers have a lot of good offensive players, I don't know if they have phenomenal offensive players. Hoskins, good. Wilson Contreras, good. Or is it William? I get them confused. But Contreras might be the best offensive catcher in the game. At least he was this season. I'm worried about them not having a stud, a top 15 MLB player when healthy. Can Peralta be the ace? While their pitching staff, like I said, has been very balanced, and the sum is greater than the parts, I would say. I'm worried about Peralta being their number one guy. He's had a very, very good season. He's had some very, very good seasons. But I worry that Peralta can come in and be that you hand the ball to him and you know he's going to go out there and shove. I don't think he's at the level of guys like Garrett Cole or Corbin Burns. Some of these who they traded away in the offseason and still somehow were fine. But some of those guys that you know can go out and shove in the playoffs. And maybe he can be. If he can be, this team gets that much better. I'm also worried about their power. They're middle of the pack, hanging out around middle of the pack with their power. You don't always need to win games with home runs, especially if you're stealing bases. And the Brewers have hit them, but like I said, they're kind of just average. And most of the playoff teams are top 10 in power, so they're lagging a little bit behind. And I think that can get you in trouble in the postseason. So maybe a little bit of a thing to watch. Lack of home run power. I'll probably say that, and then they'll have the most home runs in the playoffs and prove me wrong. But these are predictions, right? Like, who knows? What do I think the Mets are going to struggle with? Just like the Braves, I think this doubleheader is going to hurt. I mean, you use a lot of bullpen arms, and then you have to go in right into a playoff series. It's not an easy thing to do. And so I think their pitching staff, while they did save a lot of their big name arms, the bullpen's going to be tired going into that series. And that's where it's going to back up into the back end consistency. Edwin Diaz didn't look great today, blew a save, did get a win, but he's been shaky all year in his first year back from a serious injury. I think some other elements, like the bullpen does have a pretty good ERA, but sometimes I get worried a little bit about the Mets' consistency, and you need Edwin Diaz to be the closer that he's capable of being, and he hasn't always been at times this season. And if Edwin Diaz steps up and is the closer he's capable of, I think the Mets are just fine. Like I said, this series is really, really close. I'm leaning Mets, so we're going to go with Mets for sake of this video, but it would not surprise me at all to see the Brewers get hot and beat some teams in the playoffs. First National League Division Series game, the Dodgers and Padres. Kind of funny. It's similar to the Yankees and Orioles, where they're two of the best teams in the league in their respective leagues, but because they're in the same division, they have to play each other in the second round. I think the Yankees and Orioles, well, Houston exists, but those are the two best teams to me in the American League. These are two of the best three teams in the National League, and they have to see each other in the second round due to the format. Dodgers, like I said, number one overall seed, best record in baseball. Why are they going to win? They spent a lot of money, and because of that, they have the most star power in the MLB. Shohei Ohtani, massive star. I mean, who would have ever thought a decade ago we'd see a 50-50 season? That is ridiculous. Mookie Betts, no stranger to the playoffs. He has World Series pedigree. Freddie Freeman has won a World Series, incredibly gifted and talented player. Will Smith is a kind of underappreciated catcher in my mind, even if he did struggle at points this season. The Dodgers have a lot of really, really good offensive weapons, and it's going to be hard to overcome that. But yeah, you spend a lot of money, you should have a good team, right? I've mentioned the home field, and their deadline moves, I think, really helped fill some holes. They got some good bullpen arms, even though their bullpen was already really good. And getting a Jack Flaherty to help sharp a rotation that, I mean, I said the Orioles might have the best rotation in the MLB if it wasn't for injuries. The team giving them competition is the Dodgers. The Dodgers have an incredible rotation when healthy, and half of them are hurt. Thankfully, they got Yamamoto back before the end of the season and are getting him worked back in. But you have Flaherty, Yamamoto. You're hoping Bueller can continue to get better and show up. He's another guy with World Series pedigree. He won one with the Dodgers in 2020. So the Dodgers definitely have enough of a pitching staff, but their deadline really helped shore it up. Why are the Padres going to win? Well, we talked about the reason. I mean, elite offense. They're not scared of the moment because I think there's a lot of similarities between the Orioles and Yankees and the Padres Dodger series. They're not scared of the moment. They're not scared of the Dodgers. They won the season series 8-5 this year. The Padres have done pretty well against the Dodgers, and in 2022, I believe they beat the Dodgers on their way to the NLCS. So the Padres aren't going to be scared of the Dodgers. They're division rivals. They're used to playing each other. Why do I think they won't? Is the staff healthy enough for the Dodgers? I know I just gave their starting pitching a lot of superlatives, but there is still an element of they do have a lot of guys on the bench that do have playoff experience, and to be determined on Jack Flaherty. I get he's had some time with the Cardinals. He made the playoffs last year with the Orioles, although he didn't start any games. So I'm be very interested to see how Jack Flaherty goes into the playoffs this season. I mean, Clayton Kershaw, his home is on the injured list, but he has done decently well in the playoffs, pretty well in the playoffs in his career. And there's, like I said, there's just a lot of guys in the Dodgers rotation. It's hard to overcome injuries, even with some of the moves they made. Also, not trying to make my Dodgers fans out there mad, but they haven't been built for September. They won the World Series in 2020, but just like we call LeBron's 2020 ring a Mickey Mouse trophy because it was in Disney, the Dodgers, they won a 60-game season COVID trophy. And to some people, that isn't the same. Outside of that, they've been top of the league in spending, top 3 in the league in spending for a decade, and have no results outside of the wacky COVID season. And despite routinely looking like the best team, they routinely are upset. And I think that means something. I think it should mean something. And why do I think the Padres? Again, do they have enough starting pitching for the playoffs? They have Dylan Cease, surefire guy. Yu Darvish is healthy, but Darvish isn't the same Yu Darvish from 5 years ago even. Michael King had a really good season this year, but Michael King doesn't have any playoff experience. And the first time in the playoffs can be a rude awakening for a pitcher. I'm honestly surprised how good of a season Michael King has. I think his numbers are good. I think his numbers might be a little bit misleading sometimes. But the Padres, my one concern, if any, is how is their rotation going to fare in the playoffs outside of Dylan Cease? Can they do what they did in the regular season? If the answer is yes, I think they win. And to be honest, I think the Padres upset the Dodgers. Just like I think the Orioles are going to upset the Yankees. I think these two series are incredibly similar. I don't know if I've mentioned that yet. And I think, yet again, the 4 seed is going to upset the 1 seed divisional rival here. Let's move into the other NLDS between the Phillies and Mets, another divisional rivalry series. 2 seed Phillies versus the 6 seed Mets. We're going to start with the higher seed as always. Phillies have experience here. They've been, I believe, the previous 2 seasons. One, they went to the World Series. Last year, they went to the NLCS. So they've been here. They're experienced. I talk a lot about how much experience means in the postseason. Phillies have it. They have a great pitching staff, especially 1 through 4, and they're top 5. In preparation for this, I was looking at team stats and pitching and fielding and offense, looking at individual numbers, and the Phillies are top 5 in essentially every offensive category that matters. Batting average, on base, slugging, doubles, home runs, all of that stuff. So the Phillies have an offense that's capable of producing a lot of runs. Why are the Mets going to win? Despite Bryce Harper and Trey Turner and Nick Castellanos, Alec Boehm, and those guys on the Phillies, I think Francisco Lindor is the best player in the series, at least the best offensive player in the series. And it's always nice to have the best player in a series. It doesn't always mean you're going to win, but it's nice. They have a good rotation. Again, I don't think it matches up with the Phillies here. I know I said they both have a good rotation. I think the Phillies is a little bit better. I think this could be a low scoring series. The lineup is still playing well, like I mentioned. Not a whole lot changes for the Mets for me. I think they're kind of the same team, no matter who the opponent is. They're going to need to consistently score runs, but I think their pitching staff is going to keep a lot of games close. Why won't the Phillies win? I really like the Phillies. They're similar to the Padres. I think they're pretty well rounded. Maybe not as good of a bullpen, but their bullpen is still pretty darn good. Um, the only thing I could really think of as it pertains to the series is the Mets are familiar. The Phillies did win the season series, but it was 7-6, so that's really more of a toss-up than anything else. And you never know what could happen in a Philly-New York rivalry game. Both of those fan bases are pretty rabid, and they're very familiar with each other. And sometimes that's not always a good thing in the playoffs. The Mets, again, why do I think they won't win? Like I said, we talked about Diaz in the back end. We don't need to revisit that, but can they match starters? Like I said, I think they both have good rotations. I think Phillies is better. And I think 1-4, I don't say 1-5 because in the playoffs, you really don't have that fifth starter anymore. I don't think the Mets have the same talent 1-4. I think 1 is even, but I think 2-4, the Phillies have the slight edge over the Mets, and that can hurt them in a 7-game series, or is this 5-game? It's 5-game because it's divisional, I believe. Either way, it's going to hurt them coming down the stretch, in my opinion. So now, like I said, I had Phillies and Padres winning, and now we are in the National League Divisional Series. Why do I think Philly can win? I was just talking about their starters, 1-4, reliable. They can go out there and win you a game. Lots of star power on offense. They produce a lot on offense, and they've dominated the Padres this season. They won the season series 5-1. Took 5 of 6 games against the Padres, so they clearly know how to beat them. They clearly are not scared to play them. Why do the Padres win? I think they're a little bit deeper offensively. I think the Padres can go just about 1-9. Their back end, I think these might be 2 of the 3 best bullpens in the MLB. I think the Padres is slightly better. I truly believe in a late game scenario that the Padres in the 7th, 8th, 9th are going to be almost untouchable. And I think Cease is far and away the best starting pitcher in the series. I think the Phillies are deeper and more reliable, but I think Cease is individually the best pitcher in the game. And if he's able to start a game 1 and then give you a second start later in the series, that might be 2 wins for San Diego. Then they just have to piece together the other 2 to advance. Why won't the Phillies win? Their bullpen, good, not quite as deep. I really like the Phillies from a 9th inning perspective. I like guys like Matt Strahm. They have a pretty good 7, 8, 9. I just think it's a touch below. And I think outside of the Phillies' top guys, they're a little bit shaky when they start getting into 6th inning, 7th inning guys when other guys have gone back-to-back nights and they're tired. And it's just not quite as deep as San Diego, and I think that can hurt them, especially later on in the series. Why won't the Padres win? They have the best starter in Dylan Cease, but I don't know if their 2, 3, and 4 is as good as the Phillies 2, 3, and 4. So they might have to make up a gap. But as I just said, if Dylan Cease gives you 2 really good starts, then you only have to find 2 wins after that. So maybe that's not a massive why they won't. And they haven't made it past the NLCS the century. Obviously, they had the really good season in 1998, but since the years have turned to the 21st century, Padres have not made it past the NLCS. They actually lost to the Phillies in the 2022 NLCS when the Phillies lost to the Astros in the World Series. And I think the Padres in a very close. This is going to be a must-watch series. It's going to be incredibly close. But I think the Padres get revenge for 2022, and they go to their first World Series since 1998. So I'm going to show you a summary of my AL and NL bracket predictions here. You can see I have the Orioles beating the Royals in 3. I have Astros over Tigers in 2. I have Orioles beating the Yankees in an incredible must-watch series. And going to game 5, Orioles win 3-2. I have Houston beating Cleveland somewhat easily. I gave Cleveland a game because it is hard to sweep teams in the divisional series most of the time. But I have Houston winning 3-1. And then I have Houston beating Baltimore 4-2 to advance to the World Series. This is pretty self-explanatory. You can see right here I have the Padres beating the Braves 2-0. Mets and Brewers in a series that I said is the hardest one for me to pick, especially in the first round. I think the Mets squeak by at 2-1. Padres Dodgers instant classic series, a rivalry series. I think the Padres win it in 5. Phillies beat the Mets, I think 3-1. Maybe that goes to a fifth game, but I think the Phillies are a little bit more ready for the playoffs than the Mets, and I think the Mets are constantly going to be fighting back from having the doubleheader. I think that's going to throw them off the rest of the playoffs. I think the Padres and Phillies play a really, really, really good NLDS. I think it comes down to 1 or 2 at bats, game 7. I think the Padres win it in 7. Now we're going to move on to our World Series. We've talked about both of these teams at least 3 times because they both play in the wild card round. Astros and Padres. It's going to be a battle of the Houston Astros. Have a lot of experience. They've been here before. A lot of these teams, both of these teams are incredibly similar offensively. If you look at all of the team rankings offensively, the Astros and Padres are right on top of each other, or tied in pretty much every single important category. So they're very similar offensively. And I think the 2 main differences here is going to be to summarize this page. I think the 2 main differences here that are going to be playing against each other are the Astros' experience. Can they fight off Father Time and keep going? Can they win another World Series? Can they show everybody that they're here to stay? Does that experience pay off? Because at some point it's not going to matter as much, and that age will matter more. And then for the Padres, they haven't been here before, right? So how do they match up with Houston's experience? This core has never made a World Series, so assuming they do make the World Series, how do they um, how do they play under that intense pressure? And I think Houston's staff, while it has between trades and some young guys stepping up, I do think you're worried a little bit about consistency against the Padres. And I think, again, the Padres will have the best starter in Dylan Cease. The Padres also, I think, have a tad bit more star power, but assuming Yordan Alvarez is healthy, Jose Altuve, Kyle Tucker, and Yordan Alvarez is a pretty gosh darn good trio of players. So I think this will be another really tight, interesting series. Assuming I'm right and it happens, these teams are pretty similar. There's not a lot of holes in either of their games. Padres probably have a little bit better bullpen. Who do I think wins? I think the Padres win this. I think this might be the Padres' year. They seem like they're a really good team. I'm hoping they don't choke in the playoffs. I'm hoping this isn't another one of those failing AJ Preller teams. I think the Padres could legitimately do it this year and end a really long drought in San Diego. Here you go. I think they do it in 6. That is my final prediction. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you want me to keep venturing into other sports. Like I keep telling you, we have some stuff coming down the pipeline. Please like and subscribe, comment. That's also important. Give suggestions in the comment. Give some feedback, what you like, what you didn't like, what you want to see next. Follow me on X. Like I said, we have some fun hangouts over there. And like I said, just keep coming back for more videos. I appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to listen. Peace. Enjoy the rest of your week.